What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there. I'm going to talk about what's going on with the overall market, how this may affect Tesla, what's going on with the news affecting the markets, and what I do predict to happen moving forward based off technical analysis and based off different factors. Before I do anything like this, before I talk about all these different charts, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, in just about 9 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so looking at Tesla was down 2.11% for the day as the market sold off on Friday. But the question is, will Tesla sell off a lot more, or can Tesla try to find its support and try to hold support and try to bounce off that temporarily? And I'm going to answer that question in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about the overall market and how things are looking. So the fear and greed index is still very greedy right now. The market has been very greedy for quite a while. If you look at 1 week ago, 1 month ago, extreme greed has been going on for such a long time. Now, when things like this happen, this tends to tell us that the market could remain in very overbought positions for a while, as sentiment is very, very bullish, and it is due for a pullback when we hold these levels for too long. That's exactly what's starting to happen in the markets. Historically, we tend to see the markets sell off in August, at least to some degree. And the selling tends to get a little bit stronger in September before getting a nice rebound in October, then a very nice pump for November. That's what historically happens. 80% of the time in November, we tend to be green. So it's very important to note that. But looking at our momentum indicators, the market is very greedy still. Our stock price strength index is once again showing lots of extreme greed. Our McCullen volume summation index is very greedy, and the list goes on for all these different indicators. But one thing that's important is that the VIX right now is above its 50-day moving average, hitting the fearful territory. And the same thing's happening with the 200 EMA as it's holding above that. Now, that's a signal right now that the market's becoming more fearful, and that's once again going to lead to more selling if we continue to see more bearish news. Now, looking at something else that's important is we have some more earnings coming out. We have Palantir, Lucid, Shag, and just a couple of others for Monday right here. And then for Tuesday, we have AMC coming out. And this is going to be one of the big ones for retail. Lots of retail investors will be watching AMC. For Wednesday, we have Roblox, Sony, Walt Disney, and just a couple of others. And then for Thursday, we have Alibaba coming out, which is going to be a big one for the Chinese tickers. Now, in terms of data, there isn't going to be any crazy data for Monday through Wednesday that's coming out. Tomorrow, we have Bowman from the Fed speaking. So whatever they say could cause some volatility in the morning, but besides that, there's nothing else that's too big for Monday. For Tuesday, it's basically the same thing, nothing too huge. Wednesday as well, but then for Thursday, things get real as we have CPI coming out. I'm going to be expecting a very big move. This CPI in particular is going to be very important because the market is once again looking quite weak. And if we get a bad CPI, the market could see a much bigger sell-off. The market could get a big rug pull. So make sure you're ready for this if we get some bad data from CPI, if CPI is hotter than expected. If CPI is decent, the market could hold up very nicely. So we have to be ready for this. Once again, coming out for Thursday, data is going to be kind of slow from Monday through Wednesday, but Thursday is when things get real. And then moving forward, when it comes to Tesla, I've been just continuing to see the same headlines. Nothing too new is coming out so far. Researchers basically discovered that there's this jailbreak that they could find that will help them access the in-car updates for Teslas. That's not good news for Tesla, and Tesla has to really look at this, and their cybersecurity team needs to improve to stop things like this from happening. They basically were able to access paid features for free with the jailbreak, and hackers were able to do this. So it's not a good sign for Tesla. That's part of why Tesla saw some negative news, negative pressure. But for now, I believe that the more significant news for Tesla for tomorrow is going to come out in the morning. It's not going to be as big today because I'm not really seeing anything new. So I'm going to be watching what news comes out tomorrow morning. Does something happen to Tesla? Make sure you keep that on your radar. Now, for now, when it comes to the Model X listings, they're relatively high right now, not really where I want them to be. And we're continuing to see some good news simultaneously as the Model S, the Model Y, and the Model 3 are getting bought up like crazy. They're just getting lots and lots of buying of these models, and they're very popular so far, which is still a good sign for Tesla. I believe the Model Y could offset the Model X seeing these high inventory levels. And moving forward, I think things are still looking great for them as of right now, and we will see what happens during their next deliveries report. For now, there's not really enough data for me to tell you how it's going to go, most likely. Now, looking at the overall short interest, we're starting to see this go up just a little bit. More shorts are starting to pile into Tesla. as of right now, it's about 30 million of the Tesla shares that were shorted on Friday. So it's going up just a little bit more. And to add on to this, on Mondays, we tend to be green about 52.8% of the time, but we tend to be a little bit slower near the end of the week historically. During the third hour of the day, and also during the fifth and sixth hours, we tend to see Tesla a lot stronger now. And I also want to add that during the month of July, we tend to see Tesla a little bit weaker, but we tend to see it get a little bit stronger in August historically. But right now, it's kind of like the opposite. Tesla was a little bit strong in July, at least for most of the month. Then it started to slow down near the end just a little bit. And now, as August is coming, the whole market is starting to slow down. So we may get a weaker August/September period before things really improve in October. I think it's going to be a little bit different from usual because of how the whole market is performing. And I do expect a very strong November nonetheless. Tesla tends to be green about like 61% of the time. I think it's going to be even higher than that for Tesla because the whole market tends to be a lot stronger 80% of the time in November. Now, for Tesla so far, however, I just want to mention that volume right now on Tesla is just under 100 million. So a little bit lower than what we typically see, which is not the best of signs. Now, we want more volume, but the question is, what type of volume is it going to be? If we get higher volume and Tesla sells off harder, that's going to be a bad sign because we're going to be seeing more aggressive selling pressure. So far, we're not really seeing that. It's not that aggressive, but we will see if Tesla ends up breaking certain supports, because if that's the case, then things could get a little bit worse for the bulls. And this is once again just a temporary thing. I'm not saying it's the end of the world or it's going to last like forever, just temporarily. Now, the short volume relative to price is at about 51.86%. So this is a signal right here that we're seeing a little bit of an increase in the short volume for Tesla as well. And if this continues to go up, this could slow the stock down. But the question is, how will Tesla move and what trend lines should we be watching for? And I actually have them right here. So basically on Tesla, if you look at, for instance, the 30 minutes time frame, I actually have two scenarios drawn out for you. Basically, here's what I'm seeing. So Tesla's been stuck between these trend lines for quite some time. We've been stuck between our very important channel support and resistance. And we're going to be watching, how does Tesla move from here? Does Tesla continue to hold the support and resistance zone, or does Tesla end up breaking down? Now, this green scenario right here is showing us what could play out if Tesla does hold support. So maybe Tesla comes a little bit lower, very close to 250, maybe a little bit lower than that, for getting a nice bounce, coming down and just continuing to remain in this trend. Now, I can't predict the trend perfectly, but what I can tell you is it's very likely that this could play out, this green possibility right here. But I want to warn you that if we get a really bad CPI or something really bad happens, let's just say we get a very bad catalyst, Tesla could also break below the support. We could get a bigger sell-off because of some very bad news for the market. There's a real possibility of that. There's a risk of that. I want to warn you about this. If we see Tesla break this trend line, so go on TradingView or Webull or wherever you want to go and just draw this out. If we break this support right here, we're going to see Tesla sink a lot lower and come all the way down to fill its gap into the high 230s. A big sell-off is going to come if this breaks. So make sure you watch these levels carefully. Make sure you watch support, and we will find out how this ends up moving. But for now, what can I tell you about Tesla? What can I tell you about the different charts? So before I talk about Tesla, I forgot one more thing. Let me talk about SPY first before I talk about Tesla. I am sorry about that, guys. So for SPY, real quick, before I talk about Tesla, SPY is at a very critical state. We actually have two main trend lines to look out for. So on the daily chart, let me just talk about this first real quick. You will notice that our support right here happens to be right where this 442 level is, or very close to that. I would say that if we continue to sell off on SPY, if we break the low we made on Friday, I'm going to be eyeing 442, and we might see some buyers like right about there, very close to it as we approach the later days of the week. So this is where our trend line just so happens to be, just around here. If this thing ends up breaking down, we could be seeing it come all the way down to 442 and then bounce right off that. And then we will see if it breaks down a little bit lower. So if it does end up breaking below this trend line, what you could do is look at the weekly chart, and this will give you the bigger trend. Let's just close this yellow line. So on the weekly chart, let me just mention that it looks like this, basically. This is our support right here on SPY. This is like our nice accumulation phase that's forming. If SPY breaks 442, let's just say we like try to bounce off of it or not, and then we end up breaking below the trend line I just showed you on the daily chart, the next major support that could be tested would be this blue line right here. This is where our trend line happens to be. And if we were to break below it, I just want to mention that it's very important to look at our different ranges and our Fibonacci retracement levels. So we can look like from right down here going up to like the top. And we're going to be watching our like 0.786 retracement and other retracement levels like this. Our 0.382 happens to be around this 430 area, and we also have the zero point 0.5 around 420. It's going to be one of those two, which are going to be quite significant. But just to add on to this, I mean, depending on the timing, if we do sell off, if we break 442 and like below 440, you're going to be watching either like around 430, I would say, depending on the timing of it. Maybe if it's like by later September, 430 could be our bottom for SPY before this thing bounces, or it could go a little bit lower if it's a little bit quicker of a sell-off if something more major happens, and we could see this thing come all the way down to about this 422 to 425 area, very close to our 0.5 retracement. I could see 420 possibly if things get very bad before this thing bounces as well. So 420 to 430 is going to be one of those two most likely for the absolute bottom before the market starts to rocket, most likely in like the October to November period. I'm really eyeing these levels, but if this trend line even breaks, then we could turn even more bearish. But for now, I think they're very probable to hold based off this trend on the weekly so far. I want to make that as clear as possible. Anyways, now let me just talk about tomorrow specifically for the market. What are some levels to watch for on Tesla, right? So for Tesla, you're going to be watching 250 as our support. If 250 fails us, this thing could turn a lot weaker, but we're going to be watching our trend line, which I showed you earlier, right? The trend line on Tesla. If we get a break below that, here are some levels to watch for. I mean, this thing could sell off quite a bit more, and we're going to be watching if 250 holds us. If 250 breaks on Tesla, 247.5 is going to be one support to watch for, 245.95, then 245 flat, followed by 242. We also have this unfilled gap on Tesla all the way down here, so we're going to be watching this very carefully. If Tesla keeps selling off in the market, ends up breaking down very hard, Tesla has this gap all the way down to 234 that could get filled on the daily chart. That's another level that could come down in the next couple of weeks, so watch that very carefully. But for tomorrow, specifically for tomorrow, I think Tesla might gap up a little bit, retest like 255 or so, and then we might sell off depending on the news or other factors to about 250, and we will see if Tesla tries to bounce off that or not. So I find that very likely for tomorrow specifically. We will see what happens in the pre-market. I think Tesla's going to try to bounce a little bit. You can see we have a bullish divergence that developed right here. Let's see it gap up, retest our 5-minute 200 EMA. 255 is possible, a rejection off that, and then a little bit more downside, and we will see how the market reacts to that. As far as SPY goes, it's very simple. I mean, if it bounces off 446, you're going to be watching it make its way up to about 448. And if we hold 448, there's going to be some hope for the bulls. But if we fail to hold 448 and we break below the low of the day from Friday, we're going to see this thing start sinking and approaching 442, in my opinion. That's my simple view of SPY. It looks more bearish than bullish on the daily chart and the weekly chart. The daily looks weak. We got this nice change in the trend. We're also seeing this thing breaking below our important EMAs and support levels, looking more bearish on the daily, and the weekly, candles looking relatively weak. So I'm anticipating a gap up, a retest of about like 448 or so, and then a potential rejection. If it rejects and starts selling off more, this thing is going to be coming down to 442. If it breaks 448 and holds above it, there's some hope for the bulls, and we will see if that ends up playing out. I think it's more likely that this thing will sell off, though, just to be honest with you all. Apple looks relatively weak on the weekly chart, unfortunately. We're going to be watching 180 as support. I'm going to be watching for this thing to gap up to about 182.5, maybe a little bit higher. 184 is a possibility if that breaks. And then if that breaks and we reject off that, we're going to come right back down to our low of the day. And if that fails us, I see Apple retesting 178.5 if 180 fails us. And I think that's very likely if we continue to break the low we made on Friday. And then for the triple Q, the bulls want to see it make its way up to about 375. The bears want to see it break below 372 and come all the way down to 370, then 368. Now we have this unfilled gap, the last time I checked it on the daily chart, all the way down to 368. So I think it's going to fill this gap. I think 368 is coming for the triple Q. Maybe it gaps up a little bit first. Maybe it gets a back test of about 374 or so, and then rejects off that and starts selling off. I think that's very likely to start tomorrow. Like it gaps up, pushes just a little bit, then comes right back down, and we fill this gap down to 368 over the next couple of days, if not as soon as tomorrow. For Nvda, we might see this thing try to push up in the morning, retest about this 455 area, then reject off that. It could try to push up to 450 to 455, then reject off that, somewhere between that range, come all the way down, in my opinion, to about 442. And if that fails us, I'm going to be watching this thing come all the way down to 436 to 433. And then we also have this unfilled gap down here in Nvidia for this like 424 zone. So I think it's going to come all the way down there eventually as well. So looking for a little pop on Nvidia before this thing starts selling off. And there is some potential for downside. Now, if Nvidia somehow gets above 458, then there's this unfilled gap up here around like 464 that could get filled. But I think that's unlikely to play out, right? That's what the bulls want to see. I think that's unlikely looking at the daily trend. It's looking more weak. So watch for a potential retest of about 450 to 455, a rejection off that, then more downside being much more likely based off this trend for a retest of 436, if not a lower level. And if that breaks, don't forget we have this unfilled gap down here around 424, which I think will get filled if we break below 433. And I think that's very likely to happen over the next couple of days. AMD is looking relatively weak as well. I mean, I believe that when you look at the trend, it's been downtrending for quite a while. We also got this rejection candle right here. So I'm going to be watching this thing come all the way down to about 113. I think it's going to retest that. Looking at the NASDAQ, this thing broke below 14,000. It's looking a little bit more bearish on the daily chart. We could see this thing come down to fill this gap around 13,776, looking more bearish. Same thing with SPX, looking relatively weak. We have these unfilled gaps down here, also around this 44, 42 level that could get filled as well. Going to be looking for a pop to the upside in the morning, maybe a retest of 4,500 before it comes right back down. Looks more probable. Looking at the VIX, looking more bullish. Wants to get a retest of this 200 EMA on the daily, in my opinion. It may come down a little bit, retest like around the 16 area, around the 16s before it tries to bounce again and pushes for 18. That looks very probable to me. If the dollar holds 102, that could be a bearish signal for the markets. It's holding up quite nicely. And if it continues to hold up like this will be more bearish. There's a nice uptrend on the daily chart. It's approaching support right now around 102. Get a bounce, and this is going to send the market down most likely. The SQQQ is also looking quite bullish. It's starting to look more bullish, respecting a nice uptrend. It looks to me like if it holds above our 18.5 area, we're going to be watching this thing push up for about 20. That could be a target for the next couple of days. Coinbase looks relatively weak. We have this imbalance around this 84 level, which I think could get retested if we continue to sell off. So watch for a retest of about almost 90, maybe a little bit below 90 before it continues selling off. I think that's very probable. For Google, I think the same thing is going on. We have this big gap on the daily. We might see Google, once again, retest 129.5, then start selling off and come down to 126. I think that's very probable for Google. And if that breaks, we could see more downside. For Amazon, it's looking not the best on the daily. We got this nice rejection candle. We have a big gap below. I don't know if Amazon's going to crash that much, but it could fill the gap still as the market is looking weak. Looking at the 30-minute time frame right here, and I just wanted to switch to this. If you look at the trend, we have this imbalance down here around this 128 area. I don't know if it's going to come that low that quick, but I will mention this level right here around this previous resistance, which is going to become support. 134 could be tested on Amazon if it continues to sell off. And we're going to be watching for confirmation, which would be a break below 138. So I'm thinking we might see a 138 retest of Amazon. If that breaks, I'm going to be watching 134. If it tries to hold that for now, then it could try to range trade for a bit, but I'm going to be watching for a test of 138 first. And for Meta, you're going to be watching 309, 307, 305, and then these other important levels. We have this imbalance down here around this 310 area. And then also on the daily, let me find it on the daily. I think the same thing is basically or essentially going on. On the daily charts, it's looking a little bit weak. We have this big gap that is unfilled. If it breaks below our support at 309, I'm going to be watching for this gap fill all the way down to 300. It looks relatively weak, and I think the odds favor that for Meta over the next couple of trading days, if not another week or so from now. All right, guys, so that's what I'm seeing for Tesla and the whole market. Going to be watching to see if Tesla could hold this 250 support. It might gap up in the morning tomorrow, retest 256 or so, maybe a little bit higher before it comes right back down. It's going to be dictated by the news. I can't always predict that, so that's going to be tricky to predict. But I do believe the trend is looking more bearish, and Tesla will eventually break below 250 in the future. We're going to be seeing if this happens tomorrow. I think it's going to test 250. If it breaks, we're going to see more downside all the way down to the 240s. For now, we have to watch for confirmation just to see a level of safety, and we're going to be watching our trend very carefully to see how it reacts to support and resistance. I believe Tesla is going to fill the gap down into the 230s in the future, to be honest with you, looking at the trend. But watch for confirmation based off this, trend right over here on Tesla, based off if Tesla ends up holding, particular levels, and based off of Tesla ends up continuing to sell off. So I'm going to just fix this chart one more last time to show you. I just want to mention to everyone that you're gonna be watching these levels like really, really carefully. I don't know if Tesla will fill the gap by just maintaining this channel and just coming all the way down, or if it's going to break down. My gut tells me it's going to break down. It looks relatively weak, so watch support carefully. And don't forget there is a bearish case, and it does look more bearish than bullish overall, as this trend is more bearish. We're downtrending technically, and we could see a break below support to drag it even lower. All right, so that's what I'm seeing for Tesla. I do believe it's going to hit the 230s over the next few weeks to fill the gap. And we're going to be watching to see how it reacts to 250, as we could see some downside. So watch for a potential gap up in the morning before it starts selling off. And that's what I think is very probable. All right, guys. Listening. Have an absolutely spectacular rest of the day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. Watch your trends very carefully. Do what you have to do, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla in the market to the moon, as the long term is still very bright despite these short term fluctuations. And peace out.